Hi, I am Bob Moore, VP Mobile Development at Alpha Software. And today we're going to take a look at an application that I built a couple of years ago. I've expanded on it. This is a PWA application that uses Firebase Firestore, and I've expanded on that to now include Firebase Authentication. So I'm going to bring you through pretty much all the steps you need to do to build this application, and the application will be available up on GitHub. So let's take a look at the application first. So this is Alpha Notes, and this is a PWA. And it uses a real-time database so that it persists to the device. It's updated in real time. It's pretty amazing. So in this case, let's go ahead and log in as me. And get our password in here. Oh, and if we screw up the password, it'll do that on purpose. You'll see we get this nice little message that pops up and then disappeared. So let's go ahead and fix that. So we've got, I believe that's the right one. There we go. Now it comes up to show me my notes. In this case, I've also allowed it to show all records. So, and I'll show you how to do that. So these are just my records, or this is all the records that have been entered in by, say, all the different users. So that's something you can do fairly easily. We also include QBE search, so that you could say, let's say, for example, you're looking for a particular note, and you can remember like something you had written down. So in my case, I'm going to say, well, I know I'm looking for that note about the surveyor. Survey there. And so it does it. It's happening as we type, and there it is. And of course, there's the word right there, surveyor. So it allows you to sort of search through all the different notes that you have. And you can, if you wanted to, you could say, well, show me all of the notes that are of a priority of 1. And we can see we've got this one right here. Clear the search. It will also adjust based on the size of the device. So all of these adjust accordingly. So it'll work on a lot of different sized devices. And then we can go into our different notes and see what's going on. Like so. And in this case, we could log out and come back in as a different user. So this is, let's see. And let's see, we got the password here. All right. So these are notes that are specific to this user, and you have the option of allowing people to show all records, and that's just a query, and we'll show you how to do that too. Adding in a new note is just as simple as clicking on this, start entering in your information, and you're good to go. The other thing that's kind of cool about this is, and I can show you this, the real-time updating. So let's go and grab here. This is Firefox running the same application, okay? And let's say show my records. So these are different users. Yeah, they're different users. So let's see. See where it says PWA Firebase messaging notes. Let's go in there, because I'll say show all records. And in this case, I'm going to allow the whoever, it doesn't matter. Anybody can edit these notes. That's a rule that you can set. So in this case, I'll say, well, I'm going to modify this, and we'll say to build, we'll say we'll actually just change the title for notes, and we'll say January 2025. And when I do that, watch what's going to happen in this browser right above me here. So here, well, let's see if we can arrange some things here so you can see it. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. And let's bring this guy down so I can commit it. And let's clear that out. Jump back over here, sorry. And So we made a change to the title, right? And we're just going to commit it now. And there you can see the title updated there. So this all happens in real time, and it does store the information locally on the device. In our case, we're using the IndexedDB. That's what Firebase will use on a device. So yeah, it's quite powerful here. And so next we'll show you how to build this. So you have to start out by setting up a Firebase account, and we'll go ahead and do that and show you how to do that. Okay, so let's see what we need to do to get this working with Firebase. So when you get this component, when you download it from GitHub and you open it up, it should open to this page. It's an information page, and it's telling you about the application. And you have to set up a Firebase account and a Firestore collection called Notes. And this is the structure of that. You got to put some dummy records in there in order for Alpha to work with it. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at the connection strings that are required to drive the list from Firebase Firestore. So in the controls area, if you go to the list itself right here and take a look at the list properties, you're going to see that it's going to be connected to a service account. So this is how we ask Firebase what information about the collection and the field names and all that. And then this is the client-side connection to the Firestore database here. So these are just set up as connection strings. Now you won't have these, so we'll just go ahead and replace these with some new ones, just so you'll be able to see how to do that. Okay. So at this point, we're going to go right into Firebase, and so if you don't have a Firebase account, you can easily set one up just from your Google account. Just go to console.firebase.google.com, and you can set up an account there. And so we'll get started with a Firebase project. So here we go. So what would you like your name to be? So we'll call this Alpha Notes. In our case, we'll say V3. And continue. And Google Analytics, don't need it for this purpose. And now it will go ahead and it's going to start to create your Firebase project. And our Firebase project is ready. So here we are, Alpha Notes V3. We're going to go ahead and use basically two services that they offer, Firebase Authentication, and we're going to also use Firebase Firestore. So to get the app started, adding Firebase to the app itself. So this is a web application. We click on that. And it'll say, well, what would you like? And we'll call it Alpha Notes. Let's spell it right. Alpha Notes. And we're not going to do Firebase hosting for this. And we're going to go ahead and register the app. Okay. Now, in order to communicate with this application, we need to copy this right here. So this is your web apps Firebase configuration. Okay. And what I like to do is just copy this right here. We're going to use this when we do the connection string. So right click on it, go ahead and copy it, go into Notepad or something, and just go ahead and paste it there. So now we've got that ready to go for our connection string. Okay. And we'll minimize that, and we can continue on to the console here. The next thing we probably need to do here is to set up our service account. Let me see if we go to our project settings here. Yes, go to project settings, and in this case, service accounts. Click on that, and this is service account allows the Alpha server really to talk back to Firebase to get information about the database. Okay. And so you're going to need to generate a new private key here in order to do this. So go ahead and just click on that button and make sure you store the file securely. It's only going to get generated once here. You can regen it, but there it goes. And let's go ahead and open it. So we can see it's this JSON file right here. Let me go ahead and right click on that, and let's go ahead and open that with, in this case, let's use Visual Studio Code. And so this is all the information that we're going to need for our service account. So again, keep this private. I'm just going to copy that. I'm going to go back into Notes so I kind of have everything in one place. And I'll just type in service account. If I could spell that would be great, wouldn't it? And just go and paste that right there. Okay. So those are the two things that we're going to need for our connection strings. So let's go ahead and I'll just minimize that now. So we've got that information there, and we can go ahead and close out of Visual Studio Code. So that's fine there, and we can get out of that at this point. All right, we're in good shape now. And so now what we want to do is go into Alpha. And well, actually, before I do that, let me do this. Let's go ahead and actually create a database. So let's go into, we're going to do two things. We're going to do authentication and Firestore database. So authentication, let's do this. And let's go ahead and get started with that. And we are going to we'll just start out with an email and password, but they have all these other providers that you can work with. And in our case, email and password, we're going to enable that. And an email link, we're not going to do that. So let's just save that. Email and password, that's all looking good. And now for users, let's go ahead and create a user so that we've got something we can test with. So we'll add our user here. So let's say rem at alpha.com. That's not my actual email address there, but you know, you can because you can kind of put in anything there if you want. And type in a password and add our user. So now we've got a user and we've got authentication set up. And now what we want to do is we want to go into our database. So we'll go into Firestore database here. And what we want to do is create a collection. So go ahead and create a database, and database ID. Let's see here. Just pick where you want it hosted. So that's fine. That's good. Hit next. You can start it in production mode where it's going to set these rules that are basically isn't going to allow anybody to do anything, or you can start it in test mode here, where it's going to say allow read write if the request time is less than this particular date. It's good for testing. Later on, when you start getting serious, you've got to come in here and modify these rules if you're going to publish this thing out. But this is fine. We're going to allow read and write as by anybody, and I'll show you how to change that so that it's only going to be for like authorized users. That's something that we would definitely like to be able to do, but. We'll start it this way, and then we'll change it from there. So create and say OK, because we really want to make sure the user is authenticated. All right, now I can actually start a collection. So let's start a collection, and our collection is going to be called Notes. And we do need to create a series of essentially fields, okay, for our document. And these actually can change once things get up and running, but this is kind of like a starter template for you, okay? So let's do a UID, that's a string. Let's do a category. Let's do title. Author. They're all going to be strings. Priority. Note, which will be the note itself. Created, that's going to be a date, but we're going to leave it as a string. And status. All right. So that looks good. And we'll just throw an auto ID on the document, and we'll go ahead and save it. So now we have one sort of empty record in there, but it's got a structure. So when Alpha goes to look at this, it's going to see, oh, these are potential fields that could be used. That's why we just did that. Okay. Right now we're at the point where we're ready to tie this into Alpha. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so now we're going to set up the connection strings that are going to allow us to communicate with Firebase. So here we're going to our tools, and we're going to go to Alpha DAO connection strings. And you can see I've already got some set up, but let's take this a brand new setup here. So we'll say new, and we'll set up the service account first. So we'll say Alpha Notes v3 service account. And we're going to build this connection string. And so here we're going to say this is a Firestore service account settings. Say OK. And then what we do is we just paste in the information that we copied for the service account over on Notepad. So it is this whole object here. So just copy that, and then we can minimize that and just go ahead and paste that in and say OK and OK, and that's all set. Now the next thing we have to do, that's the account that allows Alpha to talk to Firebase to get the information about the collections and the fields and so on. Now the next one is the one that allows us to communicate from the client directly to Firebase. So let's go set that up now. So another new one, and this is going to be Alpha Notes, and we'll say v3 underbar client. And we'll build that connection string as well. This is our Firestore client credentials. And go back to our Notepad. And here we have our configuration for our Firebase application here. We'll go ahead and copy that. We're going to paste that in right here. And OK. And OK. We're done with that. Now, in order to get everything to work with the component, the Alpha Notes auth component, let's go in here and we'll go to our controls and go to our list. And it will already have an account set up because it's using the original accounts that I had set up. But you're going to need to change these to be associated with your stuff. So let's go in here and say, yeah, we want to set up the Alpha Notes v3 service account. And we'll do that. And the next thing we're going to do is come down here to our connection string. This is to talk to Firebase, and we're going to pick the client account there. And that should be all we have to do. Notice we've got track changes, enable persistence turned on. So we want that. Go ahead and say OK. And we should be all set at this point. Okay, now just a quick test here. Let's just run a quick preview. Log in. Yeah, and of course we don't have any notes at this point. We don't have anything in there other than that empty row of data. But let's go ahead and add one. So we'll go ahead and say add in a new note here. Here's my first test note. We'll make it a priority 1. And it is a note, and it's open, and we're going to say classic hello world, just to prove everything's up and running. Go ahead and save it, and sure enough, here it is in our list, comes up, and we know it's operational there. Okay, let's go ahead and I'll go back, and we'll enter in another note. And this is test note 2, and test 2, and we'll save that. And here we can see both of those. And let's see, let me make sure our QBE is working. So we'll say we'd like to look at our priority 1 items, and there we go, or our priority 2 items. Clear the search. Do we have a we have a priority 3 item. Okay, go back in here. Priority 3. There we go. So that's all working. We'll go ahead and clear the search here. So now you can see we've got everything up and running. Show all records would show everything. There's that empty row that we know there's nothing in that. Let's go ahead and bring that up, and I'm going to delete it. So that will just get rid of it. So it's no longer there. So this is all records, and then my records, of course, we only have 1 user here. Now what we'll do is from here on, we'll take a look at the component itself, some of the kind of key pieces that are in there, how we're doing some of the things that we're doing. So for example, we're using CSS to make sure that the alignment here is correct across the board, across different devices, and the same thing down here. We'll take a look at that. And you'll notice here we're using different templates based on the priority, which is kind of nice. So got a lot of little cool little tricks in there that we'll take a look at and see how you might be able to use that in your own components. Okay, back to the actual component here. And what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of go through things. I'm going to point some stuff out that is different techniques that I use, and then we'll just take a look at the full functionality that we can and what's driving everything. So let's start out by taking a look at client-side events, and let's look at the ones that have been defined. So we see onInitialize begin, onInitialize complete. So onInitialize begin. This is very typical of the way I use an object called this app to maintain state. And it allows me to just store any information that I want to have available throughout the application. I create a global object called this app, and I assign properties to it. So in this case, you'll see we've got user ID, email. There's a flag to animate or not animate in the panel card. And then there's the actual Firestore query is stored in this variable right here, this app.firestore query. So by default, you can see it's the user ID. So what we're going to do is when the user logs in, we're going to store that ID and email, and then this is going to be the query to actually get just the information from that specific user. This is a technique I use all the time. OnInitialize complete, what we're doing is we're going to add a class to the QBE fields. They don't allow you to assign specific CSS to that field, and so we're going to just add it ourselves. And I'll show you what that's all about. It's all about making the layout progressive so that it adapts based on the size of what's being displayed on, right? On render complete is going to adjust the note text area based on the height. So it's going to consume, let's go take a look at it. So here you can see I'm calling a JavaScript function. We'll go into our JavaScript functions here and take a look at, let's see, what was our adjustable here? It's right here, adjust the height. So just the note height to 50% of the screen size. And so that makes sure that that note size is about as big as we're going to get it, whether it's displayed in a browser or on any kind of mobile device or anything. So that's what we're doing here. And I often will run console log. You'll see that in a lot of my code just so that I can fire up a debugger and see exactly what's going on. Let's go back to our client-side events. And we've got on Firestore login. So then we process the Firestore login and pass in the e-object. And on Firestore logout, we call process Firestore logout. So again, these are going to be JavaScript functions. And we'll go take a look at those. So let's see now. Process Firestore login. So if the user's logged in, and so the login will persist. So in this case, what we want to do is make sure that the Firestore query is set up to just get the user's information by default when they log in. Say the user's logged in. Here we refresh the list data to make sure it's current. List was refreshed. And then we set the panel card active. That's the main panel card. And notice that we're passing in this app animate. So that's the flag that I had mentioned that I set back in on initialize begin. Notice it's set to false. And the reason for that is if the user's already logged in, it will by default, it's going to show, let's go back here, it's going to show the authenticate panel card. That's the first one that just pops up. But if he's already logged in, we want to transition very quickly right to panel card 1. So here, let's actually take a look at that. So if we run this here, let's go ahead and do that. Start the server. I suppose I could have done it in working preview. I always use live preview for some reason because I'm always looking at the debugger. Yeah, so in this case, did you notice how quickly it it showed the panel once and then it jumped right here. So it didn't animate it in. Whereas if we were to log out, notice we got a nice animation transition there and we log back in. That we get that nice animated transition in. So that's what that flag is all about there. Okay, let's go back to design here and go back to our JavaScript functions and take a look at the what happens when we log out. So on our Firestore logout, we're logging it on console log, and then we're setting the values to empty strings for the login and password, and we're setting the properties that we set on the this app object to empty strings as well, and then toggling this app animate to true, because more than likely we're going to want to animate that back in, and if the user has been logged in, this app gets set back to false when you exit or when you first fire up the app. So that's how that works. And then, panel set active, we go back to the authentication panel there. So that's the way that works. And if we actually look at the controls and we take a look at let's look at the login button here. So what we're doing with that is we're going to we're going to use an action here, and the action is going to be to log into Firebase. But there's a little piece of JavaScript here first that says this app animate equals true. Okay, so we're setting that true there. And then here we just call, and this here we just call the log into Firebase. Okay, and so that makes that happen. And then just save that. And then using these events, so now we've got our client side on Firestore login event, and that's where we just call the process Firestore login function and pass in the E object so we can do what we need to there. So that's what's going on there. And now let's go take a look at some more of the controls here. So I think it's important to take a look at what we're doing with the list control. And here you can see that we've already been through the connection strings and what's going on with that. Okay. But when we take a look at let's look at the list layout, because this is important. Now, notice what we're doing here is, so we're conditionally saying if the priority is 1, then use this background color, or if it's 2, use this background color. So you have conditional layouts here that are all based on the priority, because that's how we get those color changes there. Okay, that's the way that works. And notice this one down here, though, there's a hidden div with the note in it. And the reason that that's there is that's not going to show up, but the data's there. And the reason is for our QBE, our query by example, to be able to search the note, it has to be included here. That was something that I didn't understand when I first started doing this. I figured as long as the field was there, it would work. But no, it needs to be actually in this list layout here in order for QBE to work. So that's something that's important to know. Let's take a look at how we query Firestore so that we can populate the list. So that is in list properties, and it's right here, the query. So here what we're doing is we're calling a JavaScript function called Firestore query. Let's go take a look at that. So in our JavaScript functions, Firestore query is right here. Return this app dot Firestore query. So we're going to populate the query into a property of the this app object, and we're gonna compute that. So we'll go look at the buttons that we're using. Go back to controls, and so to show my records, say here, and this is the first query that really actually fires. So when it's first shown, it's just going to show this user's records. Come over here, and so it says get user records. Okay, so and the other is show all records. Let's see what that does. So we've got get user records and show all records. Okay, so again, JavaScript functions, we'll go take a look at those. And so let's see what we've got. Show all records and get user records. So here's the get user records function. Here we set the query up for, and we store that in the Firestore query property of the this app object. Then we're doing a console log on that, and then we just refresh the list data. That's the way we do it. And then of course to show all records, same kind of thing. We just pass in the Firestore query that's just an empty string, and then refresh the data. So that's the way that works. Let's go just kind of look at that quickly. So our full preview here. Okay, so show my records and show all records. In this case, we just have one user. So that's why we're not seeing any change there. So let's fix that. We'll have to add a new user so that we can see the difference between show my records and show all records. So in order to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to go back into Firebase, and here we're looking at the database. So here are the two records that we currently have in there. So here are are two different documents in the Notes collection, both from the same user. And let's go into authentication, and we see our one user here. Let's go ahead and add another user. So this will be and we'll give him a tough password here. So it's remjr@gmail.com. Let's go ahead and add that user in. So now we've got two users. And let's go back to our application over here, which is running. And we're going to log out. And we see that there aren't any records here. So let's go ahead and create a new one. And this is going to say, wash the truck. And it's a high priority item because it's covered with salt. So let's say, yeah, it's a mess. Covered with salt. All right, and commit that. So now we've got a record in there. It's a high priority item. Now let's go ahead and click on Show All Records, and now we can see these are the different users. This is rem@alpha.com, and then this one is remjr@gmail.com. So that's a way you can do that, and that's how you can set up your queries. That's really quite easy to do, and once you bring these records in, you can use the QBE search, and that will work just fine. Okay, I just launched the application in Chrome, and we're going to take a look at the debugger here. So Control-Shift-I will bring that up, and what we can do now is we're going to take a look at the performance on different size devices. So let me just bring this up a little bit here, and let's say, okay, well, what would it look like on an iPhone SE? And so notice what happened here. These buttons all stacked up, okay? And let's go take a look at what happens as we get onto larger devices. Again, they're organized in a nice fashion. This is using CSS Flex containers, and that works really, really well here. And let's go ahead and see if we've got something bigger. Now, the other thing to take a look at is what happens. Let's go to a smaller device and go to QBE search. Now notice, so because of the CSS rules that we've added to the project, these all size themselves accordingly as best they can to fit on this device, okay? And you'll see that when we go to all these different size devices. We'll go to an iPad Air, notice. So it works really quite well, and we're just leaning on CSS Flex really to handle the whole process, and it works quite well. So we're doing that for both the query area here, the QBE search, and also for this area down here where our buttons are. Now, Alpha allows us to set this the CSS rules here for these buttons, but it doesn't give us a chance in the builder for QBE CSS entries. That's why we have to inject it in the component when we build it. So I'll show you how we do that. So let's go back to the list control, and what we're going to do is take a look at list properties here and the query by example definition. We're going to open that up, and you'll see that we have certain properties that we can set, certain behaviors we can specify, but one of the things that we can't do is set the CSS for the QBE controls. So what we do is in our properties here, I've defined a local CSS definition. It's right here. And here you can see I'm creating a QBE box class, and then that's what we're assigning. This is what handles wrapping the items spaced evenly on those different rows. So this is what I'm injecting. And let's go take a look at that. So that's happening on our client side. I believe that's on our initialize complete. Yeah. So classless add QBE box. Now let's just try a test here. So let's just comment this out for right now so you can see what happens if you don't do that. And we'll go ahead and save that. Actually, okay. So now we don't have the CSS that we're adding to handle the Flex container there. And Control-Shift-I will bring this up. And let's see what happens to our QBE stuff. So as we change the size of this, so let's go down to a small. So now you can see what happens without the CSS that we're adding in for the this query area. So everything gets all messed up. And so that's why we're doing it. And you'll also notice down here that our buttons are behaving the way they should. And we'll go take a look at why that happens. So here we are back in the editor, and you can see the Flex layout has been set up for these buttons. And you can see over here the flexible layout width setting are Flex 1, Flex 1, Flex 1, Flex 1, so that they all take up the same space, and it will flow very nicely there. So one more thing I wanted to point out, let's take a look at the Google. Let's bring up our tools, our debugger, and Control-Shift-I will do that. And what I'm doing now is looking at the application tab, and we're going to look at, so this is a PWA, so it can store the data on the device itself, and Firebase will use indexed DB, and you'll see that right in here. This is so all the data is stored on the device in indexed DB and updated in real time. So any changes that are made and so on just come right into here. And then in terms of everything else associated with this application, being a PWA, you can take a look and see there's going to be a service worker that's installed. This is like a proxy, and what it does is it coordinates the caching and so on. And if we take a look at our cache storage here, you'll notice that, so here's our Alpha Notes cache, and you can see everything that's been cached and so on. So it is a full-blown PWA. It's an installable app. You can install it on a device and so on. So it's really quite impressive. And again, we're not using an alpha server here at all. We're just using Firebase. So Firebase, we're using Firebase Auth and Firebase Firestore. So the last step in the process here is going to be to take our component and now turn it into a progressive web app. So to do that, just highlight the component, click on PWA. It will have a default name and so on, and you can add description, you can add application category if you want that. This is for Google Play. They have different categories you can specify for the application. I've got everything set up. My icon's good. I'm not going to really need to make any changes here. I do have show add to home screen pop-up dialog. That's nice to have. It prompts the user to add the application to the home screen, indicating that it's a PWA. One of the things that you need to make sure of is that you check this checkbox right here that says that you're using Firebase Cloud Firestore. And the reason that you want to do that is we don't want to cache the results of the Firebase Firestore. We want those to be current. So just go ahead and check that. That's all you need to do, and click on OK. It's going to generate the PWA files. That's okay. We can open the folder. Now, all these files right here could be published to any HTTPS server, and you'd be up and running. So it's quite simple to do. Let's go ahead and close that. If you want to test it out, right here, right now, you can go to live test. You can highlight the PWA you want to play with. I've got a bunch of them on here, but let's say it's that one there. I could say, yeah, use the development server, or I could say use Alpha Cloud, whichever you want. And let's go ahead and do that. The only thing you have to be careful of here is you're using localhost here. And the PWA will run. It understands it's localhost, but you can run into problems with service workers. I'm going to bring up the tools here. The service workers are really tied to the domain, and so this domain is, live test, blah, blah, blah. So you got to be careful here if you're trying to test out multiple applications, that the service workers don't start stepping on each other. So sometimes you need to, delete the service worker from the cache and all of that. So you got to be careful with that. I do have other videos I've done on debugging PWAs, and I'll be sure to include that in the notes for this video. You can see that we've got the indexed DB is all set up. That's working. Our cache storage, our dynamic and static caches are there, so we're all set with that. One last thing I want to do is let's take a look at some Firebase rules. I'm going to tighten up the rules because right now we're allowing anybody to access the database as long as it's before a certain date. But I changed that in here. So here I went to my Firestore database, I went to my rules, and I went down and said, no, allow read write if their request.auth does not equal null. And so this will restrict, you have to be an authenticated user now in order to write into the Firestore database. So that pretty much wraps things up here today, and I hope you enjoyed going through all of this, and I hope you got some ideas on some new apps that you can build, PWA apps, using Firestore and Firebase Authentication and Alpha. Thanks.